So I have talked about this particular series multiple times throughout this list, and I've never really said anything immensely positive about it, but there is one particular entry in this series where I feel that it was just at its absolute best, and I do believe this is a game that is highly regarded by fans of the series. I believe that the creators of this series have sort of found a way to, I'm not necessarily going to say annualize it like Call of Duty and Assassin's Creed and all that lot, but rather they have found themselves able to release multiple entries of this game within a short period of time. And as such, you really can't make one ultimate definitive version because to do that would be to devalue all of the future releases. So in order to help with the money making scheme, they have to change a bit of the features here and there, that's the way that those types of games work. But this particular entry, Worms Armageddon, seemed to just have everything in it. And in fact, everything that I like about the Worm series and everything that I've seen positive about the Worm series throughout all of the Worms games I have played, even if just by a little bit, this game just has all of the things. And I have talked about multiple Worms games before, and so I really don't want to have to repeat myself for a third or fourth time or whatever, just to be able to explain the core concepts of Worms yet again, but I shall give a brief overview. It's a primarily multiplayer game where each player takes control of 4 worms. You take turns and you switch between the different worms, and within the time limit you have to use a variety of different weapons to kill all of your opponent's worms, and whoever's the last standing is the winner. And there are things to affect different types of weapons, like you can have different modes where different types of weapons are disabled, or some of them will have limited amounts, or you'll have to find crates or chests or something like that in order to be able to find them. But this game had a wide variety of weapons, and in fact, despite the fact that I've played this game a lot, it's certainly my most played Worms game, there are still some weapons that I have never seen being used, like the magic missile. I don't think I've ever seen that being used, or it might be called magic bullet, I don't remember, but it's basically the next stage up from the homing weapons. And so this game did introduce quite a few new weapons that were rather interesting, but not only that, weapons seem to have different variations and different tiers to them. So for example, the typical airstrike one, which is you choose a point on the map and all these bullets will fly from the top and they will drop and land in the area that you've planted it. But also there is the carpet bomb, which is basically the same apart from it makes many more explosions than a simple airstrike would. And also you've got variations with the grenade as well, so the grenade you throw it, it will land and it will tick down and then it will blow up. But then you've also got the cluster bomb, which causes a smaller explosion but also releases tiny little things that will also make multiple more small explosions. And you've also got the banana bomb, which is basically a more powerful version of the cluster bomb. And then there's the super banana bomb, where all of the bananas, instead of just exploding when they hit the land, they will bounce around for a bit and then they'll all explode at once. But on top of that, you've also got the holy hand grenade, which is like another variation of the grenade. And the holy hand grenade is different in the fact that it's heavier, so it's much harder to aim, but when it lands, and when it does go off, it will make a hallelujah sound and then cause a massive explosion. In fact, I remember a couple times, just for fun, I would create a huge pile of worms just by myself. I would go into this mode where you can place all of your worms one at a time. I would just create a pile of them and then get one to drop a holy hand grenade and just watch them all explode outwards. It was funny to watch. But also a story I remember in regards to the holy hand grenade. I was playing, I think, against my brother at the time, and I don't remember if it was me or him that threw the holy hand grenade, but one of us threw it at such a long distance and it managed to land in this tiny hole on this other opponent worm's head. This fantastic shot that we just could not replicate if we tried. But like I say, even with the different tiers of weapons, like with the homing missile, you choose a place for it to go and then you shoot outwards and then it will shoot outwards and it will turn back to its target. Then you have the homing pigeon, I think it's called, which will be a bit more accurate than that. You have the grandma weapon, who will walk forwards and then blow up, which is kind of similar to the sheep, apart from the sheep will bounce. And you have the super sheep that you can make fly, And then I think there's a water variation of the Super Sheep. So there's so much variety in these different weapon types, and like I said, there's ones that I never managed to actually see in action. But on top of all this, you also have a single player training mode, which I was also a big fan of, where you have to aim to shoot targets or use a ninja rope to get around to different places within a time limit and all that sort of stuff. And I was a big fan of that. And just the variety of different modes as well. I believe there was a mode called Tanks, which meant that you couldn't move. And different modes give you different presets of different weapons and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, for a multiplayer game, and bearing in mind I'm generally not a fan of multiplayer, when I was younger and I was playing Worms and I was really into Worms, this game is one that I really had a blast with, and there was no pun intended just there. Now, this game isn't really connected to any other series or anything like that, despite the fact that I have been told by one person I think that it is, but I seriously doubt that. This was a game that I was really into because during the mid to late 2000s I was really getting into looking into what types of RPGs there were, and this was one of the ones that came up, and I did get it when it came out. And I know there's a certain group of people that really like this game, and I know that there's also a certain group of people who have specific complaints about this game, but those complaints, I don't really understand what the big problem is. The game I'm talking about is Rogue Galaxy. So I got this game on the PS2 back when it came out. I believe this was one of the late PS2 games. You know, when the PS2 cases stopped providing the memory card holder slot thing. It may have been one of those games, although I'm not too sure. And I'm not sure if that's still the case in other regions, but I know that in the UK, later PS2 games tended to do that. You could tell by the inside of the box if it was one of those late PS2 games. But easiest way to describe Rogue Galaxy is that it is an action RPG, if you want to use that short form descriptive term. But you run around the map and battles activate randomly, which I really like. And you have this AP bar which only allows you to perform so many actions within a certain time frame. So it's not all completely actiony button mashy type thing, which also I really like. Each character has a long range weapon and a short range weapon, and also anytime you can activate different characters' abilities by pressing the triangle button, at least I believe it's the triangle button, to sort of open up a menu so that you can scroll between the different characters and select an action for them to do. So that might be something like using an item or using one of their special attacks. Now, the way that you level up in this game and learn abilities is very simple. You basically have this ability grid thing, kind of like a skill tree thing I suppose, apart from you need to input certain items into the slots rather than spending points. So you can have a character who you just don't use, but still level them up with their abilities because you get all of the appropriate items. And generally this doesn't have that much depth to it because a lot of the items you just have to find along the way, although there are sometimes shops which will host the items for you to buy, sometimes in limited quantities. But the big complaint that a lot of people seem to have about this game is the level design. And what's quite unusual about that is that the level design in this game is such that I would suppose it kind of follows the same purpose as what open world does, apart from people really like open worlds for some reason. But allow me to explain how this game works with its level design. The different dungeons throughout the game consist of several different paths, and as you move around the map reveals itself so you can see where it is that you've been to, but you can't see anywhere that you haven't been to yet. You actually have to go to the places in order to be able to find out. So there is sort of like a maze-like quality. Now, one of the big complaints I've heard is that the level design is as if it was produced by a random level generator, which I can see that because it feels like a lot of the terrains are repeated, and you will have areas where it is a bunch of corridors and different paths leading from those corridors. But you see, the thing is that the level design itself isn't about the complex nature of the level design. It's more about just going out there and playing the game, and you will run into areas that you you will not need to go, or you might go through less efficient paths. But at the end of the day, the purpose for that is that it means that all of that time you are travelling and you will encounter enemies along the way. And really, that's kind of the same thing that open worlds are all about. There's not really any exploration in open worlds really when you think about it, because you don't need to know where things are. There is a type of level design which this game doesn't particularly have, where you need to explore the surroundings because it benefits you to know exactly where things are. This game isn't one of those games, but this game is one of those games where you will sometimes go the wrong way, and that's okay, because you can just continue playing and you will eventually go the correct way. It's just a means of allowing the player to have these long stretches of time where you will be moving around and you will be fighting enemies and opening chests and all that. And I really like that for this particular game. I think it works really well, and I don't understand the complaints about it. Now, this is a game that I didn't play until many, many years after release, and I did not play the original version. I played a sort of a remake version, and this game has gone through quite a few variations because it's had quite a few, I'm not necessarily going to say ports, but I suppose I could say that it's gone through quite a few different remasters in a way. And so I got this game when it came out in 2003. That is the PlayStation version. The original version of this game came out, well, in the UK. It didn't come out at all. In fact, it only came out in Japan originally. And the game I am talking about is Final Fantasy II. So this came on the Origins collection, which I believe came out on Red Nose Day of 2003, because I specifically remember being at school and then coming home and I had it because I asked my mum to go and buy it for me when she was out. So this was a bundle that came with Final Fantasy 1 as well as Final Fantasy 2. And of all of the remasters that this game has gone through, I would say that this one is the truest to the original Famicom version, which I believe came out in 1988 in Japan, which was the year I was born. So this is quite a controversial game within the Final Fantasy series because of the leveling mechanics. And so I will go through that. And I think this was one of those games where, because it was the second game in a series, it was kind of a bit strange. And I've also noticed this with a few other Nintendo games as well, like Super Mario 2, even though it's really Doki Doki Panic, but it's the second game in the series, so it's a bit different, a bit strange. Same with Zelda 2 Adventures of Link and Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest. That was different from the other Castlevanias around that time. This was kind of the same. So I am going to refer to the characters by their most recent translations. So that would be the PSP mobile phone version. So you have the main four characters, Firion, Maria, Guy and Leon, and right at the very start you enter a battle in which you are against four Dark Knights and they are far too powerful. And after the first battle you lose Leon as a party member, and throughout the game you will have these three characters, with the fourth character switching between different characters that you'll encounter throughout the story. So if you know about the Final Fantasy series, and especially the older ones, you will know that it's a turn-based RPG with random battles and all that lovely stuff. But what's very interesting about Final Fantasy II specifically is the leveling system, because in this game you don't have a level for your character. Rather, each character has their own individual stats, and those stats will raise based on what abilities and techniques they use and how they act during the battle. So for example, if they get hurt a lot during the battle, their max HP will raise, and if they spend lots of MP, their MP will raise. And the same goes for like strength, the more that you attack and all of that. You also have different types of weapons as well, of which each character has their own set level with. So a character can have a sword level as well as a shield level. And magic is the same, because when you teach magic to a character, they get that spell at level 1, which means it will cost 1 MP to use, and the more that you use it, that spell will level up. And in the original version of the game, stats can also go down, so the more that you'll use magic, a character's strength might start to go down, so that encourages even more the idea that you want to develop these characters in specific ways so that they can take on a specific role. And also this game does separate white magic and black magic into different categories, so you can have different stats based on whether you're casting white magic or black magic. This game is also really strict with its inventory space as well, and they changed this with the later versions, and I find this quite annoying because it's not like true to the original, I suppose. And I think that a lot of the times when it comes to remakes of these really old games, they try to, and I use this in quotes here, modernize them by allowing features such as save anywhere or unlimited inventory space or up to 99 of each item, as it would be in this case. But the original Final Fantasy II and the PlayStation version, which I think is perhaps the best version of this game, at least in my recollection, your inventory space is limited per individual item, so each item takes up one slot, and this includes key items as well that you need to progress the story, so your effective inventory space goes down. Also, in the original versions as well, you can give your characters up to 2 items to hold, and these are the items that they can use in battle, including the magic tomes, which you would use to teach your characters different spells. But if you use it as an item, it will be consumed and they will cast the level 8 variation of that spell. What's also quite funny is that with different weapon proficiencies and all that, is that each character is either left or right-handed, so you can put a weapon in their dominant hand, which will allow that weapon to level up and be more effective at a faster rate. But what's funny about this is that in the original Famicom version, the game never actually informs you of which hand each character holds their weapon in. So if you get Layla and you give her a sword in her right hand, it's like, okay, you put that sword in her right hand, so well, I guess she's just not going to be very good at using that sword then, because you put it in her wrong hand. And it was your choice to do that? Oh well. Which I also think is quite funny in the whole you should have ultimate control type people who think that having control over everything is always the best thing. And it also reminds me of games like QWOP, where it's all about funky random controls and all that sort of stuff. But one last point to make about this game is that it also has a very funky map design as well. So the world map is actually one giant continent that wraps around the entire planet. And you can, in theory, walk to pretty much anywhere right from the start of the game, but the catch is that in order to get past certain areas, you have to defeat really, really powerful enemies. And so when you want to talk about games that focus on exploration and all that, I think this game is really high up there.